Shorts are getting demolished. Bulls are getting rewarded. Bitcoin just punched through $75,000. And the XRP army is finally seeing green after months of pain. But something much more important is happening underneath this rally. And if you only look at the price chart, you'll miss it completely. Iran just proposed pausing nuclear enrichment for up to 5 years. The US had asked for 20. That's a counteroffer. A counteroffer means negotiation. Negotiation means the probability of resolution just increased. And when geopolitical probability shifts, risk assets move before any outcome is confirmed. At the same time, US PPI data came in at 4%, significantly below the expected 4.6%. That's the producer price index, the wholesale inflation measure that signals what's coming for consumers. When PPI underperforms expectations, it tells the Federal Reserve that inflation pressure is easing, which means the path to rate cuts clears, which means the macro headwind on crypto starts lifting. And Secretary of State Rubio is taking part in direct talks between Israel and Lebanon today. Another de-escalation signal, another probability shift, 3 macro signals, 1 session, and the market responded by sending Bitcoin through $75,000, XRP toward $1.43, and the entire altcoin market into outperformance mode. Today, I'm going to break down why these 3 signals matter more than the price rally they produced, what the Clarity Act returning from Easter recess means for the next 2 weeks, why the alt season indicator just flipped, and how the convergence of geopolitical de-escalation with legislative timing creates the exact setup XRP has been waiting for all year. This is not financial advice. I am sharing publicly available information for educational purposes. Always do your own research. Before we get into it, drop green in the comments if today's rally feels different from every failed rally of the last 6 months. Drop negotiation if the Iran counteroffer is the signal that has your attention most. Drop PPI if the inflation data is what you think unlocks the Fed. I want to see which macro signal this community is reading as the most important. Welcome back. I am the Calm Analyst. Around here, we follow the macro threads that determine where crypto is actually going. Today, we're connecting the Iran negotiation development, the PPI inflation data, the Israel-Lebanon talks, the Clarity Act returning from recess, and the alt season indicators into one framework. Because when multiple signals align in the same session, it's not coincidence. It's a regime change in motion. Let's get into it. Let me start with the Iran development, because this is the piece that most crypto channels don't know how to interpret properly. Iran proposed pausing nuclear enrichment for up to 5 years. The US had asked for 20. On the surface, that's a rejection. Iran wants less than what the US demanded. Why is that bullish? Because negotiation positions are not outcomes. They're starting points. When 2 parties publish opposing proposals, the real information is that they're publishing proposals at all. Weeks ago, there was no proposal, there was military escalation, strikes on command structures, the IRGC intelligence chief killed. Now there's a counteroffer with a specific timeline. That progression, from strikes to proposals to counteroffers, is the documented pattern of how conflicts transition from kinetic to diplomatic. The endpoint isn't the US getting exactly 20 years of enrichment suspension. The endpoint is somewhere between 5 and 20. The distance between the positions is the space where a deal gets made. Markets understand this, which is why Bitcoin pushed through $75,000 on a development that a naive reading would describe as a failure. Because the informed participants reading the geopolitical signals correctly understand that a counteroffer is more bullish than silence. Silence means nothing is happening. A counteroffer means both parties are moving toward resolution. And the second round negotiations that Pakistan is facilitating confirm the direction. The weekend talks in Islamabad produced substantive proposals. Both sides are now preparing for round 2. The diplomatic machinery is functioning, and every day it continues functioning is a day where the probability of meaningful resolution increases. The oil market is confirming it. Oil prices dropped back under $100 after extending losses. The market is pricing a lower probability of Strait of Hormuz disruption continuing indefinitely. And when oil drops, the entire transmission chain we've been tracking reverses. Lower oil, reduced inflation pressure, increased probability of Fed rate cuts, lower opportunity cost on risk assets, capital rotation into crypto. That transmission chain is exactly what just triggered the rally. If that geopolitical framework just showed you how the news connects to the price, smash that like button, because understanding why prices move separates the reactive from the positioned. And right now, the positioned are the ones who saw the counteroffer for what it is. Now let me connect the PPI data. because this is the macro signal that compounds the geopolitical shift. US PPI rose 4% versus expectations of 4.6%. That's a significant miss to the downside. Producer prices are the wholesale inflation measure. They tell you what's coming through the supply chain before it hits consumer prices. When PPI underperforms expectations, it signals that the inflation pressure the Fed has been fighting is easing faster than anticipated. Here's why this matters for crypto specifically. The Federal Reserve has been maintaining elevated interest rates because inflation remained above target. Elevated rates create opportunity cost. When you can earn 4.5% risk-free on government bonds, the incentive to hold volatile assets like crypto decreases. That opportunity cost has been the single biggest macro headwind on crypto prices for 2 years. If inflation is easing faster than expected, which today's PPI data suggests, the Fed's path to rate cuts accelerates, and rate cut expectations have historically been the most powerful catalyst for risk asset rallies in modern financial history. The market began pricing this the moment the PPI number was released. Stocks rallied, bonds rallied, crypto rallied, all three asset classes responding to the same signal. Inflation is cooling, the Fed can cut sooner, risk assets benefit from the liquidity expansion that follows, and the Fed minutes are coming Wednesday. If the minutes reveal committee members discussing rate cut conditions or expressing concern about the economic drag from elevated rates, the market will extend today's rally. Because rate cut probability shifts move prices before the cuts happen. 3 macro signals, 1 session, Iran counteroffer reducing geopolitical risk premium, PPI misaccelerating the Fed's path to cuts, Israel-Lebanon talks adding regional de-escalation, and all three landing in the same week that the Senate returns from Easter recess with the Clarity Act markup window open. Comment below. Which signal do you think is most significant for XRP's near-term trajectory? Type Iran if it's the geopolitical de-escalation. Type PPI if it's the inflation data. Type Fed if it's what Wednesday's minutes might reveal. I want the community's honest read on where the macro leverage sits. Now let me connect this to the Clarity Act, because the Senate returning from Easter recess with the compromise already done creates an accelerated timeline. The compromise on the stablecoin yield provision was reached before the recess. The banking lobby's primary objection has been removed. The DeFi and token classification details are in final review. Senator Lummis has publicly called for immediate action. Senator Tim Scott, the Banking Committee chairman, holds the scheduling pen. With the macro environment improving, oil dropping, inflation easing, geopolitical risk decreasing, the political bandwidth that was being consumed by war-related emergency debates opens up. Senators have more floor time available for market structure legislation, and the bipartisan momentum that produced the 294 to 134 House vote translates more easily to Senate action when external crises aren't dominating attention. This is the political bandwidth channel that we discussed before. Geopolitical de-escalation doesn't just help XRP through the macro price transmission chain. It also helps through the legislative timeline by freeing up the Senate to focus on legislation that was being crowded out by emergency defense and economic debates. Both channels point the same direction. Lower oil plus easing inflation equals better macro conditions for risk assets and better political conditions for the Clarity Act. The same forces that are pushing Bitcoin through $75,000 today are creating the environment where Tim Scott can schedule the markup without competing against emergency appropriations or national security briefings. And the timing has hard deadlines. The Banking Committee has 2 working weeks remaining in April. Senator Moreno confirmed that if the bill doesn't reach the floor by May, it won't move before midterms. Galaxy Digital put May as the hard cutoff for 2026 passage. The macro tailwind that just arrived is the tailwind the Clarity Act needs to advance on time. Today's rally is not just a price event, it's evidence that the conditions for completing the final XRP catalyst are materializing faster than the bear scenarios projected. Subscribe right now, hit the bell, drop a in the comments. Because the convergence of macro improvement with legislative timing is happening in real time. And every update from Washington, every inflation print, every diplomatic development gets tracked here as it happens. Now let me address the alt season indicator, because something shifted today that most of the market hasn't processed yet. During deep bear phases, Bitcoin dominance rises. Capital concentrates in the safest crypto asset while riskier altcoins bleed. During recovery phases, capital rotates from Bitcoin into altcoins as risk appetite returns. And during full alt seasons, altcoins outperform Bitcoin by significant margins because the rotation accelerates. Today's price action shows early rotation signals. XRP up 6% on the week, near protocol double digits, AVAX double digits, Pepe running, WorldCoin moving, Monero at position 88 showing strength, and the outlier, Rave, running 6,000% in days. Individual altcoin pumps aren't alt season, but the breadth matters. When multiple altcoins across different categories, layer ones, memes, privacy coins, AI plays, all show strength in the same session, it's a signal that capital is rotating out of the pure Bitcoin concentration and exploring risk further out on the curve. XRP specifically benefits from this rotation because its correlation with Bitcoin amplifies Bitcoin's moves. When Bitcoin runs in a risk-on environment, XRP's 1.5 to 2.0x beta produces outsized returns. The only thing holding XRP back during pure Bitcoin rallies is the 144 cost basis wall. But in an alt season where rotation overwhelms resistance, cost basis walls break. And here's the part that connects today's rotation to the XRP thesis specifically. The alt season that follows a sustained macro recovery tends to reward utility-driven assets more than it rewards speculative ones, because the institutional capital that enters during recovery phases has mandates that prefer documented use cases over meme narratives. XRP's institutional infrastructure, regulatory clarity, commodity classification, and documented utility in cross-border payments positions it perfectly for the kind of alt season that institutional rotation produces. Not a meme-driven pump, a utility-driven re-rating, where the infrastructure that's been built over the past year finally gets reflected in price. Today's rally is the first signal that this rotation is beginning. The question is whether it's the beginning of a multi-week move or a one-day reaction to good macro news. And the answer depends on what happens in the next 3 to 5 days as the additional catalysts, Fed Minutes Wednesday, ongoing Iran negotiations, potential Clarity Act markup scheduling, either confirm or contradict today's signal. Now let me reframe the current moment for the XRP community, because this is the message that matters most. For 6 months, XRP holders have been told to prepare for sub-dollar prices, 40 cents, 70 cents. The haters said it was coming. The bear models priced it in. The fear and greed index sat at extreme fear for 49 consecutive days. And through all of that, the infrastructure kept building. Ripple Treasury launched with native digital asset capabilities. Swift certification went live. The FDIC ruled tokenized deposits equal bank deposits. Morgan Stanley approved XRP for wealth management. Rakuten onboarded 44 million users. ETF inflows hit a record April pace. Whale accumulation reached 10-month highs. The people who sold during the fear provided exit liquidity to the institution's positioning for today. Not because today is the peak, because today is the beginning of the recognition that the infrastructure was real all along. The macro was the suppressor. And when the macro starts lifting, the infrastructure that was hidden underneath becomes visible. $75,000 Bitcoin today. The PPI miss, the Iran counteroffer, the Israel-Lebanon talks, the Clarity Act compromise done. The Senate back from recess. The ETF inflows accelerating. The alt season rotation beginning. These are not isolated events. They are the simultaneous reversal of the conditions that compressed this market for 6 months. And when simultaneous reversals happen across macro, geopolitical, and legislative channels at the same time, the price response historically outpaces what single variable models predict. The people who bought cheap XRP during the pain are looking at today's green and recognizing that patience is finally being rewarded, not with a final destination, with confirmation that the thesis was right. The destination is still ahead. Let me leave you with this. Today's rally is not the move. It's the first signal that the move is approaching. The macro conditions are reversing, the legislative timeline is advancing, the infrastructure is complete, and the compression that kept XRP at $1.30 for months is finally releasing. Bitcoin through $75,000. XRP bouncing to $1.43. Alt season rotation beginning. Fed Minutes Wednesday. Clarity Act markup window open for 2 more weeks. Iran negotiations advancing to round 2. Inflation cooling faster than expected. This is what the setup looks like when multiple independent variables align in the same direction. The forces that have been working against the market for 6 months are now working for it. And the asset that sits at the intersection of the largest institutional infrastructure build-out in digital asset history is perfectly positioned to capture the rotation that follows. The haters said 70 cents. The data said 1.43 and climbing. The haters said XRP was dead. Today's volume said institutions are buying. The haters said nothing was happening. The macro signal said everything is happening simultaneously. You were here, you held, you built the position when it was painful. And the setup you built it for is finally starting to materialize. Price is a distraction. Value is the reality. Structure is what matters. And the structure today, Bitcoin through $75,000, PPI below expectations, Iran negotiating, Israel-Lebanon talking, Clarity Act compromise done, Senate back in session, ETF inflows accelerating, alt season beginning, is the first complete alignment of bullish conditions XRP has experienced in 2026. In a market fueled by emotion and noise, we thrive on data and composure. Remember, haste leads to loss, while calm analysis leads to victory. Comment calm analyst below. Tell me what you're watching closest. Fed minutes, Clarity Act markup date, Iran round 2, or the 1.44 wall finally breaking. Because the convergence we covered today produces different outcomes based on which catalyst fires first, and the calm investor is positioned for all of them. Like, subscribe, notifications on. I'll see you in the next one. Stay patient, stay rational, and as we always do, we don't wait for the future, we plan for it. Peace.